for $2,000, the Sony A7 III is probably the best low light camera on the market. Hi guys, I'm David with Media Unlocked, and today we're going to be talking about the Sony A7 III. I'm shooting this video on the Sony A7R III, which I really like, but it's about a $1,200 difference. It's about a $2,000 camera versus a $3,200 camera. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I really like about the Sony A7 III and a few differences between the Sony A7 II and then the Sony A7R III. So let's just I've made a nice little list here of things that I really like. Of course, I just got this camera a few days ago, so I'm going to be testing it out over the next month. Thank you, B&H, for sending this out for the test, so we can review it and see what we think of the Sony A7 III. It does get a little tongue twisting when you talk about the Sony A7 III, A7R III, A7S II, 3, whatever, exactly.
It's my job to mess those up.
Yeah, Bill, as Bill said in the background, it's his job. He really gets tongue-tied. We've had to do like 20 takes because he cannot say the Sony A7R III for some reason. He just can't get it down. And it just got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to say it. You can just call it the Sony camera. They know what you're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about the Sony A7 II versus the Sony A7 III. One of the nice things is you're getting a full stop of extra dynamic range between the two cameras. As well, you're getting a much nicer battery system. The battery that the Sony A7 II originally had are those really small batteries, where the Sony A7 III, it has a much larger battery, so you're getting a lot more pictures. Now, supposedly, you actually can take more pictures in RAW format with the new battery on the A7 III versus the A7R III. So the camera that we're shooting on right now, the battery will die a little bit faster when shooting pictures versus the A7 III. So I am intrigued. I haven't actually tested that out, but I've done some research, and these are the reviews that people have put out. As well, the A7 III has a new chipset in it. It's very similar to the A7 II, but this chip pretty much it speeds up the processing. It's a chip that's connected to your sensor, and it's going to speed up the processing when taking pictures. As well, you're going to get 10 frames per second at RAW, and you can shoot up to 89 pictures at RAW format, and you get 10 frames. Now remember, the Sony A7 III does only have 24 megapixels versus the 42 megapixels that the Sony A7R III has. So the one nice thing about the Sony A7R III is that it has double the megapixels versus the Sony A7 III. But again, we're talking $1,200 difference here, which is massive. I mean, let's just be honest, guys. The Sony A7 III is literally the best full-frame camera on the market for the money right now. They're just, in my opinion, and I love my Sony A7R III a lot. I'm really happy I bought it. But if I had known this was coming out, I would have considered maybe getting 2 of these instead of 1 of those, or purchasing the Sony A7 III and then spending that extra $1,200 on glass. So, and especially if you're like me, where I came from Canon, I've been slowly selling all my Canon equipment off and just buying Sony equipment. So, of course, with the Sony A7 III, you're getting the 4K, pretty much the same 4K that you're getting from the Sony A7R III, which is fantastic. It does the information at 6K and then downscales it to 4K on the Sony A7 III, where I think it's at 5K and downscales it to 4K on the A7R III. The focusing is really, really good. It has a very similar focusing system as the A9, which is the big flagship camera from Sony. So A9 is kind of considered the primo, the best, camera that Sony's offering. You've got the A9, the Sony A7R III, and then now the Sony A7 III, and hopefully the Sony A7S III later on this year for video people out there. So that's fantastic. In the Sony A7 III, you're going to get the S-Log3, which is fantastic. A lot of people really like shooting the S-Log3. It really flattens your image and allows you to put those colors back in, and you can really clean your image up. So it makes it really, really good. Far as ISO capabilities, I'm interested to put the Sony A7R III up against the Sony A7 III, which one's going to perform better in low light situations. But with that new chipset and the sensor, you are getting really decent low light out of this 24 megapixel camera. I do think the Sony A7R III is going to actually outperform it in the low light capabilities. But again, for $2,000, the Sony A7 III is probably the best low light camera on the market, maybe the best low light camera ever to hit the market. I mean, I'm dead serious. This is an amazing camera. I love Canon so much, but Sony is just doing everything right, in my opinion, these days. So those are a few of the comparisons between those cameras and a little bit about the Sony A7 III and my thoughts on it, just testing it out for a few days now. I just kind of wanted to talk about it. Of course, the body is about the same as the Sony A7R III. The Sony A7 III's body is pretty much that same. You probably could not actually tell the difference between the two cameras if you didn't see up here in the left corner, if you could see which model you're actually using. You made it this far with me and listened to me ramble on about these Sony cameras, so go on and hit that subscribe button down below. Our newest video that we put out will be right here. And of course, if this is a camera you are interested in checking out and or purchasing, go on and hit that link down there in the corner, because we get a little bit of commission, and that's what keeps Media Unlocked up and running so we can make videos for you guys. Have a great one.